السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدنا علما رب زدنا علما رب زدنا علما نافعا آمين. Before we begin, please confirm the voice quality. Am I audible? Write in the chat box. Yes, can everyone hear me clearly, inshallah? Can you see the notes? Okay. Okay, khair. So let's begin. We are at the second muqaddimah, al-muqaddimatu thaniyah. The second muqaddimah, or you can call it concept, the foundations of understanding Islamic law. But before we take this muqaddimah, let's do a recap of the previous one. What are the fruits we took from the previous muqaddimah? We said Usul al-Fiqh in our religion are qat'iyyah. One of the main characteristics and qualities of the concepts in our religion, or the basic concepts, the basic foundations of our religion, is qat'iyyah. Qat'iyyah. Or we can use another Quranic term, because qat'iyyah is al-qat' wal-dhan. These are more technical terms, but if we use the Quranic term, we can say yaqeen. Yaqeen, certainty. So we believe in some higher truths, higher realities, absolute realities, which are out there. They are not only philosophical concepts in the minds of some intellectuals and philosophers, but they are out there. It is a reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a reality, one God. This one God is engaged in time and space, is a reality. He is running this universe, it's a reality. The concept of prophethood is a reality. The concept of akhirah is a reality. This life is based on ibtila. From Muslim point of view, or we can say our worldview, is that this life is based on ibtila, test. And we connect all other concepts with this basic concept. This is also a reality. So we believe in higher realities and higher concepts which are out there. They are not only philosophical postulates. It's very important, because we have two main areas in our religion. Islam covers all affairs of human life, but we can say the two main areas which are the foundation of all other concepts. We have the aqidah or aqaid, and we have ahkam. Ahkam, law. Okay, so these are the two main areas of our religion. Aqaid, the belief system, and it affects our behavior. Ahkam, the law, the practical law which we have to apply in our life, which we do, do's and don'ts. Both these areas, or the principles, the foundations of both these areas, are based on yaqeen. Or the principles and the foundations of both these areas are qat'i. And if you remember, we said qat'i means no ihtimal. Ihtimal. No probability of doubt, no probability of mistakes, no probability of confusion. Okay, so no shak, doubt, no one probability of mistake or conjecture. Okay, so in the basics of our religion, whether it's aqaid or ahkam, law, or the methodology of understanding law, there is no ihtimal. It's qat'i. It's based on yaqeen, no doubt. And we explained this in the previous muqaddimah. And one of the main arguments of Imam al-Shātibi in explaining this, he says that if we accept dhann, if we accept shak, doubt, mistakes, probabilities, and dhann in the principles of our religion, in the basics of our religion, or in the foundations of our religion, it is tantamount to distortion, change, so tabdeel, tahrif. If we accept that the principles of our religion are not based on certainty, and we are not sure, we believe in some principles, we follow ahkam, but there is probability of doubt in that, there is ihtimal, there is conjecture, it means that the basic deen or the foundations of our religion are open to tabdeel, distortion, change. And this goes against the concept of hifz, the concept of protection. For this last and final religion, or last and final revelation from Allah, mentioned in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to protect this religion. And we read from the first muqaddimah, Imam al-Shātibi rahimahullah says that protection here means protection of usul, protection of the basic principles or the foundations. Okay, and this is something very strong. This argument by Imam al-Shātibi is very strong. The perfection of this religion, the protection of this religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has safeguarded this religion from distortion, from change. It means that the basic principles of this religion are qat'i, are based on certainty, and the basic principles are definitive. But what about dhann? We also talked about dhann. It means we said that dhann is not accepted, conjecture, probability of doubt is not accepted in the basics of the religion, in the principles. But what about the branches? What about the branches? We said that the dhann can be accepted in the branches. Dhann, al-dhann, can be accepted in the branches of religion, or even in the branches of the usul. So our aqaid, the usul are definitive, but the details, we can accept dhann in that. For example, the concept of akhirah. There is a day when all human beings will be judged. It is a definitive concept based on clear ayat of the Quran, and also aql. It's based on the rational possibility. But what about the details? We have a lot of ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned details about the last day. The sirat, the stages we will have to go through on the last day, and all other details. So if someone, for example, if we have a person who disbelieves in the last day, or a Muslim who disbelieves in the last day, he becomes a kafir, he is out of Islam with agreement. If someone says, I don't believe in the last day, he's out of Islam. Or if a non-Muslim says that I will believe in everything, but I don't want to believe in the last day, we cannot accept his Islam because it's a principle from the principles of Aqidah. But what if someone believes in the last day but denies a branch or a detail from the details of the last day? For example, if someone says, I believe in the last day, but I don't understand the concept of Sirat, the bridge on Jahannam. I don't believe in that. Is he a kafir or not? This is the discussion of the scholars. So we will say he becomes only sinful because he rejects the hadith of the Prophet, he rejects something which the Prophet ﷺ explained to us, but he's still a Muslim. Why? Because this detail, this one juz, the bridge on Jahannam, is not based on any ayah of the Quran. It's not based on mutawatir, a hadith. It's based on a solitary narration. It's based on khabar ahad, one hadith. And solitary narration has probability of doubt. Okay, so that's why when the scholars, they say that khabar ahad, solitary narrations, they don't lead to yaqeen. It doesn't mean that we don't have to believe in solitary narrations. Most of our religion is based on solitary narrations, based on khabar ahad from the Prophet ﷺ. What they say is, what they mean is that if someone denies it, he does not become kafir. He only becomes sinful. He only becomes fasiq. So yes, dhann is valid in our epistemology, but when it's supported by qara'in, when it's supported by indications or evidences. Okay, so dhann we have a term for that. We don't accept, because dhann involves doubt. We don't accept doubt in our religion. We don't accept false probabilities in our religion. That's why we call it, if you remember, we call it al-dhann al-ghalib or al-dhann al-rajih. We call it al-dhann al-rajih. Accepted dhann, which is based on evidences. Okay. For example, when scholars say that a hadith in principle, they give the benefit of dhann, but if they are supported by qara'in and evidences, they can be lifted to yaqeen. They can be lifted to the darajah of certainty. For example, we have hadith scholars who say that the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim can be lifted from dhann to the level of yaqeen, certainty. Why? Because the overwhelming majority of scholars, or almost all scholars, have accepted the authenticity of the ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim because of the strict conditions of Imam al-Bukhari and Muslim. And all fuqaha and scholars of law, they use these ahadith. So they say, if we have a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, it is an indication that it is a sufficient indication to lift it from dhann to the level of certainty. Okay, so we're not going into the details. What I'm saying is, dhann is accepted in human life, in day-to-day life. All our affairs are based on dhann. Risks are involved. We gave the example of criminal procedure, court procedure. The witnesses, the testimony of the witnesses is based on dhann. We are not sure the witnesses, there is probability of doubt, there is probability of mistake, there is probability of lying. Okay, but we base our criminal procedure or court procedure on the testimony of the witnesses. In fact, we declare the blood of a human being halal. Yani we punish a human being. Sometimes the punishment is very severe based on testimony of human beings. Okay, so if we don't accept dhann, we cannot run day-to-day affairs of human life. So dhann is accepted in our religion, but it must be supported by the evidences. And there are certain types of dhunun, certain type of dhanns, if we use this word in English, which can be lifted to the level of yaqeen. Okay, if dhann is supported by evidences in Arabic, we call it qara'in. Indications, supportive evidences, we can lift the dhann to the level of yaqeen. So this is the basic structure of our epistemology, of our theory of knowledge. Now let's move to the second muqaddimah. In the previous muqaddimah, another point, important point, which Imam al-Shātibi rahimahullah made was the role of aql. The role of aql. The role of intellect. Okay? Because what does he say? He says, in explaining the evidences, let me read from directly from the book. In explaining this claim that usul al-fiqh is qat'i, he gives two main evidences. Okay, he says the first evidence is innaha tarji'u imma ila usul al-aqliyah. Usul al-fiqh, the basic principles of our religion, are qat'i because they return to the rational principles. And the rational principles, anything based on aql, is certain. It gives the fa'idah, the benefit of certainty. So he says, innaha, the principles of religion, the principle here we are talking about law, Islamic law, but it applies to all principles of religion. Innaha tarji'u imma ila usul aqliyah wa hiya qat'iyyah. The first evidence of this is that these principles, they are based on, or they return to the aqli usul, the principles based on aql, intellect. وَهِيَ قَطْعِيَّةٌ. And these principles are qat'i. So anything which is based on qat'i becomes qat'i. وَإِمَّا إِلَى الْإِسْتِقْرَاءِ الْكُلِّ. The second evidence is that these principles of religion, principles of usul al-fiqh, are based on istiqra, based on inductive method. We explained that. Okay. So the main evidence of this claim that the principles of religion are qat'i is that they are based on aql, and anything based on aql is qat'i. Okay, that's why in the second and third muqaddimah now he explains the role of aql, and this is a very important topic which engaged the scholars, the early scholars, the later scholars, and even today, both in the East and the West. We have scholars who are discussing about the role of aql. In fact, this is the battlefield in which all intellectual battles are being fought, particularly for Muslims. What is the role of aql in understanding, particularly understanding our religion? Where do we place aql? Do we reject it outrightly? Do we accept it? What are the rational arguments we accept? What are the rational arguments we reject? Can we reconcile between aql and naql? So we have two important terms: al-aql and an-naql. Naql means narrated. Naqala yanqulu means narrating something. So it refers to wahi, revelation. And aql is intellect. So how do we understand this? Can we merge? Can we merge aql and naql? Can we reconcile this? Scholars have written about this. The discussion is still going on. The battle between East and the West, the Western civilization and Islam, is all based on this important point, the role of aql. The West emphasizes the role of aql. It bases its knowledge and theories and understanding on aql. Muslims emphasize the role of naql, the wahi, which has been revealed from the 7 heavens. And for us, naql takes precedence on aql. Naql comes first, and then we understand aql in the light of naql. So this is the discussion. This is the discussion. And in the second and the third muqaddimah, Imam al-Shātibi sheds some light on the role of aql. So let's read this muqaddimah. As we have mentioned earlier, that we have only taken the main claim from the muqaddimat in brief, just few lines. You can read the explanation in the translation. Inshallah, we will also read it. This is helpful in focusing. So he says, and the unwan, the title is from the scholar who has summarized this. He's a contemporary scholar. He summarized these muqaddimah. The title is the fruit of the muqaddimah. So he says, Al-Muqaddimatu Thaniya, the second concept. Adillatu usul al-fiqhi qat'iyyatun. The evidences of usul al-fiqh are also definitive. Qat'i. Okay. So usul al-fiqh, this ilm in itself, and we explained, if you remember, we said by usul, he means 3 things. Number 1, the evidences of the Sharia. Number 2, the higher principles of the Sharia. And number 3, the methodology of extracting ahkam from the Sharia. And we also said that one can be accepted in the details. And one is present in the details. It does not harm the claim that usul are qat'i. So adillatu usul al-fiqh qat'iyyah. Okay, what does he say? Let's read this. He says, إن المقدمات المستعملة في هذا العلم والأدلة المعتمدة فيه. The muqaddimat, the concepts, let's call it concepts, al-musta'mala, used في هذا العلم, in this field of knowledge, and he's referring to usul al-fiqh, wal-adillatu al-mu'tamadata, and the evidences, adilla is plural of dalil, which means evidence. فيه, in this ilm, in this field of knowledge, لا تكون إلا قطعية, or not except definitive. Okay, so both the concepts and the evidences are قطعية. لأنها لو كانت ظنية, because if we accept that they are ظني, they are not based on certainty, and there can be room of doubt and ihtimal and probability in the basic concepts and the evidences, لم تفيد القطع في المطالب المختصة به, then they will not benefit certainty in the areas which they are connected with. Okay, so it means, for example, if we say the aqaid we believe in are based on dhanni evidences, what does it mean? It means the fruit, the aqidah we believe in, that God is one, Allah has names and attributes, prophethood, the concept of akhirah, all these concepts are also open to doubt. They are not qat'i. They are not ultimate truths, because these concepts are based on evidences and based on principles which are dhanni. So anything based on dhanni is also dhanni. It's open to probability and doubts. Okay, and this is not accepted. This is against the basics of Islam. Okay, so there's another important point which we must remember. We know Quran, the book of, whenever we talk about evidences, any evidence, whether it's intellectual evidence based on intellect, or it's sunnah, qiyas, ijma, any evidences we talk about, the source of all evidences or the foundation of all evidences is the book of Allah, Quran. Always remember this. This is our mustamsak, yani this is what we hold on to. It protects us from all doubts. Any concept in Islam, any juz'iyyah, any branch, any concept, any principle, you will find its origin in the book of Allah. Alimahu man alimahu wa jahilahu man jahilahu. Those who know it, they know it, and those who are ignorant of it, they are ignorant of it. Yani you need skills and understanding, deep understanding, tadabbur, reflection on the Quran to find this out. Anything. Quran is the book of principles. You will not find details of many things in the Quran, but any concept in our religion, any detail, if you reflect, you will find its source in the book of Allah. Quran is aslul usul. Always remember this. Quran is aslul usul. Quran is the principle, the foundation for all other principles and foundations. And we know Quran is qat'i. Qat'i thubut. Quran is definitive in proof. There is no room for doubt, mistake, probability in ayat of the Quran. So we don't say maybe this ayah has been narrated by a narrator who forgot, maybe he committed a mistake, he added something to the ayah, or maybe there are some ayat which have been missed from the Quran. No, Quran is qat'i thubut. And anything based on qat'i, anything based on definitive evidence is definitive. Okay, so all our concepts, whether it's aqidah, ahkam, akhlaq, ethics, morality, anything, whatever you understand or you try to search, you will find its basic concepts and evidences in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, this is also a strong evidence for the claim that the principles of this religion are qat'i. Even the principles of understanding the evidences, extracting the rulings. Like we mentioned, the four main sources of our ahkam: Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas. We can understand it from one ayah of the Quran. Some ayat can be debatable. Some meanings are debatable. It's not a problem. But we have ayat which serve as principles for all other principles. We mentioned that in the previous session. And same applies on all other concepts. Okay. So he says, لِأَنَّهَا لَوْ كَانَتْ ظَنِّيَّةً, because if we accept the concepts and the evidences, basic principles as ظَنِّيَّة, as based on probability, conjecture, doubt, لَمْ تُفِدِ الْقَطْعَ فِي الْمَطَالِبِ الْمُخْتَصَّ بِهِ, then it would mean the concepts based on these principles will also be ظَنِّيَّة. They will not benefit qat', they will not benefit certainty in the areas they are connected with. وَهَذَا بَيِّنٌ, and it's very clear, it does not need any explanation. It does not need any explanation that the principles, basics of our religion are qat'i, because they are based on qat'i evidences and principles, and all the concepts based on these foundations are also qat'i. Okay, and remember this, we are talking about the basic aqaid. Of course, here the topic is law, Islamic law, and the principles of understanding and ijtihad. If you remember, we connected it with ijtihad mutlaq. We said the doors of ijtihad mutlaq are closed because no new evidence can be added to this religion, no new concept can be added. What we have is the principles. We can accept a principle, we can reject an evidence, we can frame our ijtihad in this canvas, but we cannot go out of this area. We talked about that. Okay, so this is the second claim. we can see that the second muqaddimah is like an explanation of the previous muqaddimah. But if we go back to the book, to the details, we will see that Imam al-Shātibi, rahimahullah, is talking about the role of aql. Okay, let me read from the muqaddimah. Okay, so this is here the main claim. Then he says, why do we accept these muqaddimat? Why do we accept these principles of religion and the adilla, the evidences? See, again, he explains the meaning of usul, adilla, evidences. We explained this in the previous session because he says, وَهِيَ إِمَّا أَقْلِيَّةٌ. And now he classifies these muqaddimat. He classifies these concepts. He says the basic concepts of our religion are of three types. Aqliya. Please understand this properly. This is very important. Number one, aqliya. Number two, adiyya. Adiyya. And number three, sam'iyya. Sam'iyya. Okay. So these are the three areas, or these are the three, this is the classification of the principles. So the first area is aqliya. The foundations of our religion are qat'i, definitive, because they are based on these three areas. And all these three areas, they are qat'i, at least the basic principles in these three areas. Aqliya means based on aql. Adiyya is based on ada. Ada means or urf, we call it. Let's use the word ada. Ada is the pattern followed by anything, any principle, any group of people. If they follow a certain pattern, or if a thing follows a certain pattern, we call it ada. Okay, custom. Sam'iyya is based on sami'a yasma'u means narrating something, listening to something. And here, this is another word for naql. Naql. Narrated. And the ayat of the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, let's call it primarily Quran and Sunnah. Because Quran and Sunnah is narrated. Aql has no role here. It's narrated from Allah, and Sunnah is narrated from the Prophet ﷺ. Aql may have a role in understanding it, but aql has no role in the narration. Okay, so we see aqliya, adiyya, based on ada or custom, and we have sam'iyya, based on ayat of the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. No, ada is not tradition. We'll come to that. Now, the most important thing here is aqliya, or the most important area is aqliya. Let's talk about that. What does he mean by aqliya? Aqliya refers to aql. And in aql, we have two important things to understand. The mahiyya of aql, essence. Mahiyya of aql. and the role of aql. Mahiyya means essence. What? What is aql? The scholars have disagreement about this. That's why, if you remember, I said in the previous session that when engaging in discussions, we must make sure that we understand the basic concepts, we understand the epistemology, we understand the terminology. When for example, we talk about the existence of angels and belief in angels, and someone tells us belief in angels is irrational or it's illogical. Do you believe in angels in the 21st century? Before we engage in discussion about angels and evidences for the existence of angels, we must first and foremost talk about the term logic. What do you mean by logic? What do you mean by rationality? What do you mean by aql? This is very important. So when we engage in discussion with people who don't share the same tradition, who don't share the same epistemology, who don't share the same worldview, who don't share the same belief system, it will become a futile exercise. We will not reach anywhere. This is very important. See, for example, if we are talking about, if we are discussing with a person who does not believe in realities beyond the five senses, or realities which are not perceived by the five senses, or he only believes in knowledge based on the five senses, we cannot engage in argument with that person because his epistemology is limited and our epistemology is broad. We believe in knowledge based on five senses. We believe in knowledge based on tajriba, experience, experiential knowledge. We believe in knowledge based on wahi. We believe in knowledge based on ilham, intuition. So our epistemology is broad. And the epistemology of a person who believes only in five senses is limited. How can we engage in the discussion? This is very important. Okay, that's why you must have, if you reflect, sometimes reflecting on simple concepts, it gives us a lot of knowledge. See, how do we translate the word ilm these days? Al-ilm. What is the English standard translation in English? Is science. Right? So we say ilm al-hadith, sciences of hadith. Ilm al-fiqh, sciences of fiqh. Ilm means knowledge, has been reduced to science, which is a field of knowledge. Better word for this field is empirical science, the area which is limited to understanding the tangible realities, right? So this is the problem. Even in terminology, ilm has been reduced to science. The message is anything which is not tangible, which cannot be perceived by five senses, does not exist. It's unreal. And this is the worldview of the modern and prevalent Western civilization. We know the foundation of Western civilization in principle is Christianity, Christian thought. But now, even that is diluted. Atheism is creeping into the Western civilization. That's why if you take the example of scientists, they usually, in our age and time, they promote atheistic scientists, and the scientists who are atheists. There can be better people in that area, but they don't promote them because maybe they are good Christians and they believe in religion. This is a reality if you dig deeper. So this worldview and this philosophy has effects everywhere, even in linguistics, even in theories of language. The death of the author, text. When the author of a text, he writes it, he dies. There is no meaning. Multiple meanings. Meanings will be carved by the readers. So if 10 readers read a text, we will have 10 meanings. Chaos, no meaning. And these have become philosophies. I'm not an expert in that, but this is just an example. So we have to understand the mahi of aql. the essence of aql. Is aql an energy? It exists. Everyone agrees. Aql exists in our body. We use it. And this quality of using our aql or aql, it differentiates us from animals. It makes us human beings, right? But what is aql? Is it energy? Is it the basic necessary knowledge which we have as human beings? Al-ilmu daruri. Okay. Is it instincts, the knowledge which is based on instincts? So on, we have a lot of theories, and Muslims have also discussed about this. Or again, what is the foundation of aql? Where is aql located? Everyone agrees on the location of the brain. It's tangible. But is this quality of aql, irrespective of the differences, whether it's energy, whether it's instincts, or its basic necessary knowledge, where is it located? Is it located in the heart, the spiritual heart, which is in the physical heart, or is it located in the brain? There is disagreement even between Muslim scholars, and works have been written about that. So whenever you engage in aqli arguments with people, don't be afraid as Muslims. There is disagreement even about the mahiyya of aql. So when you make aql a standard to judge concepts, there is disagreement about the essence of aql itself, which you make a judge, right? So the essence of aql is dhanni. There is no agreement even between the scientists and the non-Muslim scholars. There is no agreement, and there is difference of opinion between the Muslim scholars also. And we know the famous Hanafi opinion that aql is in the brain, and it's connected with the heart also. And the majority opinion that aql is in the heart. And they use ayat of the Quran as evidences, so on and so forth. That's why the scholars of suluk, specialists in understanding the secrets of the nafs, they connect the hawa, the desires, and the pollution of the nafs with aql. Because aql is in the heart, and all these desires and nafs, it's also in the heart. So that's why when the heart of a person is polluted by desires, aql is smoked. And this is a very profound concept. Yani, the foundation of change is not only on understanding things. For example, smoking is injurious to health. Everyone knows this, and you prove it with evidences. You know, you show the pics of the rotten lungs of a person. You base it on experience. You see people dying because of smoking. It's cancerous. It leads to cancer and other diseases. So from these evidences, you gain the knowledge of this concept that smoking is injurious. But at the same time, you see people who know this, they know this, but they're still smoking. And while they are smoking, they know that we are committing something wrong. So the problem lies in something else. Only knowing a fact is not sufficient to stay away and abstain from that evil or from that sin. Nafs is also involved. So if the nafs is weak, you have weakness in the nafs, nafs desires something, nafs desires an action, or you're used to a sin for a long period of time, it becomes a habit, ada. It becomes very difficult to get rid of that sin, even if you know. And this is the case with every one of us. When we are committing a sin, particularly practicing Muslims who are born in Muslim families, living in Muslim societies, while we are committing that sin, we know that it's wrong, but we are not able to resist. So only knowing does not help. This is very important. So those scholars who are of this opinion that aql is in the heart, they connect it with desires. They say when the desires, it's like drugs. You know you're doing wrong, but you cannot resist. So when the heart is polluted by desires, aql is smoked. Aql cannot work anymore. So it's not, the change is not only about knowing things, information. The change is about creating a change in the habits of the nafs. Okay, so this is a different topic. Inshallah, we're planning to have some courses about personality development and suluk and nafsiyah. Inshallah, we'll talk about that there. The second important point which we have to understand here is the role of aql. So aql, even if we don't go into the details about the mahiyya, which is a philosophical concept, doesn't matter whether aql is in the brain or in the heart, it's an energy, it's an instinct. We all agree that it is there. We should use aql. Allah has praised aql. Using our aql in the best way differentiates us from the animals. This is agreed upon. But the role of aql is what we must understand. Or al-adilla al-aqliya or al-asalib al-aqliya, rational arguments. Rational arguments. We know if you read the book of Allah, you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in explaining the concepts of our religion, has given some great and beautiful rational arguments for his existence, for his uniqueness, for other concepts. And the great prophets, they also used rational arguments. You know, the best example of that is Ibrahim alayhi salam. If you read about his debate with his people and the arguments he used, our scholars of kalam and theology, they have based and extracted some great rational principles from the argumentation and the debate of Ibrahim with his people. If you read those ayat, the ayat about declaring the sun as God, the moon as a deity, and so on and so forth. So rational arguments can be used. They are valid. Quran has used it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used it. The prophets have used it. But we must differentiate between rational arguments, which are qat'i, again, and rational arguments, which are only dhanni. Some people, they fall into this mistake. They think that a particular rational argument is qat'i. There is no room for doubt and mistake in that argument. And they make it as a foundation of their personality. You know, like people who think that what is perceived by five senses is real, everything else is unreal. So this rational argument is qat'i. But if you dig deeper, even the philosophers of the West, the early philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, they were against this. They believed in metaphysics and so on and so forth. So this is the point of argument. Muslim scholars, whether they belong to the Kalami tradition, they belong to the tradition of Ilm al-Kalam, or those who are against it, like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah and others, his students, the Hanbali or the Athari school of thought, they are all of them, with the differences they have. They are neither against aql. They understand that aql is the greatest gift given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They understand the importance of using aql as a human being in our life, particularly in understanding the higher concepts. They also understand the importance of rational arguments. They only disagree about the nature of these rational arguments. So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rational arguments, some of them, they say, no, number 7, I will not accept it as a valid rational argument. I have counter arguments against that. It is a dhanni rational argument. I cannot accept it. Some others, they say number 5 is weak. Some scholars may disagree with some particular rational arguments. Okay, so this is very important. Those scholars who wrote against Ilm al-Kalam, they were not against aql or aqli arguments. They were only against some rational arguments which they thought are weak. They cannot be accepted, and they had evidences for that. So for example, if you read the book of Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, Madarij al-Salikin, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim represents the thought of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. In that work, this work is about tasawwuf, and we know Sufi tradition has its own epistemology. You know, two groups of Muslim scholars were staunchly against ilm al-kalam or using aql in understanding aqidah. Number one are the muhaddithun, the scholars of hadith, and Hanabila, at least the majority of Hanbali scholars. And number two are Sufis. The Sufi tradition is against aql. In their epistemology, ilham and wahi takes precedence. So the knowledge based on intuition, the knowledge based on divine experience is the best knowledge. The knowledge based on aql is nothing. So if you read, for example, the works of even some Sufis who are considered out of the track, like Ibn Arabi, if you read his work, Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, you will realize how he has bitterly criticized ilm al-kalam. And you will feel as if I'm reading Ibn Taymiyyah. So they share the same epistemology. So in this book, Madarij al-Salikin, Imam Ibn Qayyim, when discussing about adillah, evidences, he says that we are not against using evidences, rational evidences. We are only against using some particular rational evidences which we think are weak, or which we think or claim that they lead to dhann, they don't lead to yaqeen. Okay? So it's a debate and discussion about adillah. And in fact, this is one of the most deep and profound areas of our religious thought, particularly kalam. So kalam, ilmul kalam, deals with, how do we define kalam? Ilmul kalam is understanding aqidah by rational arguments. So the understanding the types of rational arguments, differentiating between valid and invalid rational arguments is the key. That's why I say those scholars and du'at who engage in discussion with atheists and the confusions in modern age and time must be well versed in the classical ilmul kalam, the classical Muslim theology and philosophy. It's very important. Studying it, being an expert in it does not necessarily mean that you believe in all of its concepts, but you must understand, because ilmul kalam, again, all our religious sciences, they are based on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't believe in this foreign influence theory. Kalam was influenced by Greeks, influence of Greek theology, Roman theology. Fiqh was influenced by Roman law. Jurisprudence is also an influence of Jewish jurisprudence, so on and so forth. These are all claims of Orientalists or enemies of Islam. There can be influences. Of course, we believe in that. There can be influences in a particular science or a particular field of knowledge, but the fields of knowledge which we produced as Muslims, we gave it to humanity, they're purely based on our worldview. They're purely based on Quran and Sunnah, and it was a new knowledge which we gave to all of mankind. And Kalam is no exception to that. Okay, that's why if you read this, or if you study this field of knowledge, you will find the majority of the principles in this area are all based on the book of Allah. They use terminology like the terminology in hadith, terminology in fiqh, terminology of usul, but if you dig deeper, you will find they take their principles, or they take the Quran, the book of Allah, as their guide in understanding the principles. And some scholars have explained that. Yani in dealing with the Kalami principles, the rational evidences used in understanding Aqidah, they have explained, or they have mentioned the evidences, which are the sources of those principles. Like the best book to understand that is Tafsir of Imam al-Razi. You may not agree with everything, but his tafsir is one of the best tafasir in understanding or connecting the rational evidences with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't have time to study a book like Tafsir of Imam al-Razi, Mafatihul Ghaib, it has been published in several volumes. There is a small treatise. If you study that, it will inshallah benefit to understand this mas'ala. An-Nur al-Mubin fi Aqa'id al-Deen by Imam Ibn Juzay. You know, Imam Ibn Juzay is one of the best mufassirun of the Quran. His tafsir Ibn Juzay is a masterpiece and one of the best tafasir to begin with. Tafsir Ibn Juzay al-Gharnati was a great scholar from Spain again, like Imam al-Shātibi. His treatise, An-Nur al-Mubin fi Aqa'id al-Deen. He talks about aqa'id, aqidah, and connects every principle, rational principle with ayah of the Quran. And he was an expert in that. He was an expert in aqidah and also great mufassir of the Quran. So if you have time, please go through this treatise. We mentioned it in our first podcast, or maybe in the second podcast, if I remember correctly. An-Nur al-Mubin fi Aqa'id al-Deen. So, this is a topic in itself. The purpose only was to understand the framework. Okay, the role of aql in understanding its mahiyya, understanding the rational arguments. And when Imam al-Shātibi here refers to aql or aqliya principles, he means the definitive ones. Okay, so aql, don't think that aql and all aqli principles always leads to qatl. This is incorrect. Aql always does not lead to qatl. There are many things which we based on aql, which are dhanni. Even science is based on theories, which keep on changing with the change in experience and knowledge. So all aqli arguments and principles are not qatl. But Imam al-Shātibi is referring to the aqli principles. The second area which he mentioned, we will not talk about the third. The third area we said is sam'i. The first is aqliya. The second is adiyya, based on ada. And the third is sam'i, based on the ayat of the Quran. Because as Muslims, we believe in that. We know that anything which is based on, in our religion, based on Quran and Sunnah, it becomes our religion. So no need to discuss the third. And the whole book of Imam al-Shātibi is an explanation of that. And all ulum of Islam, they serve the book of Allah. They basically explain the wahi revealed by Allah. So what do we mean by ada? Ada means a pattern. So in aqliya, there is no possibility of takhalluf. Please understand this properly. Takhalluf. So if something is based on an aqli principle or an aqli argument, there is no possibility of takhalluf. It means it is bound to happen. It is qat'i, definitive. There is no room for takhalluf, impossibility. There is no room for doubt. There is no room for mistake. So for example, when we say 1 + 1 is 2, there is no room for takhalluf. You cannot say 1 + 1 is 2, but maybe sometimes 1 + 1 can become 3 or 1 + 1 can become 10. No, we cannot say that. This principle is based on aql and it's definitive. No room for takhalluf, no room for breaking this principle. For example, the famous example which the scholars give here is ijtima'un naqidain, the meeting of two opposites, or the opposites cannot meet. This is an aqli claim, and there is no room for takhalluf in that. So you cannot say opposites cannot meet, but sometimes they can meet. You cannot say that. Okay. So though there is no room for takhalluf, we put a cross here. In ada, there is room for takhalluf. because it is based on a continuous pattern, custom, or tradition, you can call it. Something which happens again and again, and it becomes a fixed pattern. But it does not mean that it will always happen. Okay. For example, fire burns. It is not based on aqli muqaddima. It's not based on rational principle. It's based on ada. Fire has always burned, and we see fire always burning. So we conclude that fire burns. But sometimes maybe fire does not burn, because it's based on ada. We are used to it. We see it daily. It becomes a fixed pattern in our minds. Okay, that's why. How do we define mu'jiza? Who can tell me? Write in the textbooks. How do we define mu'jiza? Mu'jiza, the miracles given to the prophets. And we say one of the main evidences for the prophethood of a particular prophet is mu'jiza. Mu'jiza, miracle, and they are of different types, given to different prophets in different ages. Like the best miracle, the best mu'jiza, which was given to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the Book of Allah. And there are some physical mu'jizat as well. How do we define a mu'jiza? It's connected with this topic. Beyond scope of ada, any deviance from ada, good, mashallah. Events which are out of common observation or observable domain. So in Arabic, we what do we call it? We call it kharqul ada. Kharqul ada. Again, the word ada. Kharqul ada. Kharqul adati. Kharq means tearing the ada. Okay. So we see the moon is one being, one existence. It's not made up of two things joined together. It's one whole, right? And we see it like that from millions of years. But when the Prophet ﷺ, it is one of his mu'jizat that he split the moon into two. We don't say that this is impossible in aql, because moon is one whole, is not an aqli concept. It is based on ada. We have been seeing it like that. Who knows? Yani, we see the sun from a distance. It appears to us in a particular form, but no one has seen it in front of him. No one has ever traveled to the sun directly. It's impossible. Maybe when we reach there, it appears in a different form. Who knows? Okay. So, kharqul ada, tearing the ada. How do we define ada? Ada is a fixed pattern, but there is possibility of takhalluf in it. Takhalluf. Yani it can break. So we say fire burns. This is a fixed pattern. But fire did not burn Ibrahim alayhi salam. In other words, now what I'm going to say is very profound. Note it, remember it. It will solve a lot of problems for all of us in understanding. In other words, the cause and effect. Cause and effect. The rabt, this rabt, this connection between cause and effect. Cause always leads to effect. This connection here, is it aqli or adi? Is it aqli or adi? Who can tell me? So cause always leads to effect. But this connection between cause and effect, is it aqli or adi? What does it mean? Is it aqli means there is no room for takhalluf. It will always lead to effect. If the cause is present, the effect will be present. There is impossibility of takhalluf. But if we say it's adi, cause will always lead to effect. but there is room for takhalluf. So who can tell me, is this connection between cause and effect aqli or adi? The cause of rain is cloud, is aqli. No. Yani, there can be clouds, but they don't cause rain always. So the existence, but yes, the source of rain are clouds. We can say that. Let's not go into that, but it's aqli. See, some are saying aqli and some are saying adi. Okay, so if we say that connection is aqli, it means there is no takhalluf. If we say connection is aqli, we are negating mu'jizat. Fire and burning. So fire burns. Fire is the cause and burning is the effect. If the connection is aqli, and we say, how did we define aqli? We said there is no takhalluf. It will always happen. How can we say that fire did not burn Ibrahim alayhi salam? Subhanallah. Yani this is what, and some great principles of Aqidah are based on that. We're not talking about Aqidah. Like tawakkul. Tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based on this concept. If you read the ayat about Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ibrahim was tested in his Aqidah, and he was steadfast, and the king casted him into fire. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could protect him before casting into the fire, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could give death to the prince, to the king. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would extinguish the fire before Ibrahim was thrown into it. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wait? Ibrahim was thrown into the fire, and if you read the ayah does not say Allah commanded the fire to stop. Allah did not extinguish the fire. So Allah did not say, oh fire, stop. Allah said, Ya naru kuni bardan wa salaman ala Ibrahim. Oh nar, you're there, you're burning. Don't stop, but only become bardan, cold, wa salaman, a source of protection. Don't harm Ibrahim. Subhanallah. What does it mean? Basically, the point here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds the cause and effect in his hands. This is the point here. So fire, the cause can be present, but it does not lead to effect, because Allah does not allow it to lead to effect. So we are not going into that. And this is tawakkul, reliance on Allah is based on understanding this. So we say that the rabt between, scholars disagreed about this. Yani the scholars of Aqidah, they have a lot of discussion about this. Is the rabt aqli and adi? How do we define aqli and adi? But if we define it, if we say aqli means no takhalluf, then of course the rabt is not aqli, it's adi. Okay? Because if we say rabt is aqli, then we deny mu'jizat, or we deny the fact that sometimes cause does not lead to effect. It's also against experience. Sometimes the cause is present, but the effect is not present. You know, we see a person, we see two people having the same disease, and they are at the same stage. They go to the same doctor. They take the same medicine. One is cured and the other one dies. The cause is there, the effect does not. Right? So these are some important details about aqli principles, understanding the rabt between cause and effect, understanding the role of aql, understanding the fact that aql does not always lead to certainty, differentiating between rational arguments which lead to certainty and rational arguments which don't lead to certainty. Don't fall into the trap of worshipping aql, worshipping aqli arguments, and believing in the fact that aql always leads to certainty. This is wrong. This is wrong. And at the end, today, let's have a brief session, inshallah, so that we also grasp what we are learning. At the end, I will give you two quotes from two great scholars of the Muslim Ummah. And you can taste the knowledge in these two quotes. You can memorize it, you can share it with others. And the explanation we have already given. The first quote is by Imam Al-Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi. Al-Imam Al-Ghazali. Everyone knows who is Ghazali. Imam Al-Ghazali. Ghazali and Ghazali, both is correct. He says, Al-Aqlu Al-Shari. Aql with the Sharia, Aql with Naql, supporting it, understanding, using Aql, subservient to Naql is Nurun ala Nur. Is light upon light. Al-Aqlu ma'a Shari Nurun ala Nur. Beautiful quote. Okay, so we don't deny the role of Aql. We don't deny Sharia or Naql, the knowledge which has come from the heavens. We only try to reconcile between the two. We learn the art of reconciling between the two. Al-Aqlu ma'a Shari Nurun ala Nur. And the second quote is by another great scholar, Imam Waliullah ad-Dehlawi. He was a great scholar from subcontinent, Waliullah ad-Dehlawi. And again, Waliullah ad-Dehlawi is also famous for his work, which is very near to Muwāfaqāt. Its name is Hujjatullah al-Baligha. This book is also about understanding the higher principles of the Sharia. And these two books are very near to my heart. Wallah, if you read these two books deeply, you will agree with me that the knowledge in these two books are based on ilham from Allah, from intuition. Yani the structure of these two books is very unique. The knowledge explained in these two works is very unique. Imam Waliullah ad-Dehlawi says, Ar-Rasulu Athbat. If I'm not mistaken, inshallah, I will see the exact wording of this from the book. And if we have mistakes, we'll correct it. But this is the meaning. Ar-Rasulu Athbat indana min uqulina. The Prophet, Ar-Rasulu, Athbatu, is more strong or stronger in proof. Indana, indana min uqulina. Athbat, stronger for us. With us as a Muslim, min uqulina, than our intellects. So if we have to choose between our aql and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we choose the Prophet. What does it? It means the knowledge which is coming from the Prophet is definitive, and the knowledge based on our aql can be definitive, can be speculative. These are two beautiful quotes from the two great Muslim thinkers and scholars we have ever produced. Okay, so the summary of this muqaddimah is that the principles of our religion, particularly the law, are qat'i because they are based on aqli principles. Or generally, the principles of our deen are based on aqli principles, and these aqli principles are definitive. Anything based on definitive becomes definitive. Anything based on qat'i is also qat'i. That's why you will see the higher principles of our religion, whether it's in aqidah or law they have evidences, of course, from the Quran and Sunnah, but they are also in line with aql. If you reflect, they are also in line with aql, whether it's aqidah or akhlaq or law. So for example, one of the higher principles used in law, Islamic law, is Allah huwa al-hakim. Only Allah is the legislator. Humans cannot legislate. This is also in line with aql. Human legislation is destroyed, the mankind. How? We'll not go into the details. So this principle, only Allah is the legislator. Human beings will only engage with that legislation which Allah gives, apply it, understand it. They don't have any authority in changing it or rejecting it. This is from the Quran and also in line with aql. And this applies to all other principles which you read, which you study in Islam. So let's stop here, inshallah. Inshallah. The room is now open for Q&A. Please ask relevant questions about the topic, inshallah, that will benefit us. So let's begin. Bismillah. You can ask in Telegram. Let's discuss. Okay, why are some scholars strictly against going into kalam? Can you please name some basic books on ilm al-kalam to begin with? See, one of the best scholars in ilm al-kalam for us is Imam al-Ghazali, and he is a famous Ash'ari mutakallim. But at the same time, if you read study his Ihya al-Ulum, he is against ilm al-kalam for common masses because it creates doubts. Maybe if you play with fire, you're not experienced, you may fall into something which becomes a source of evil for you. For this reason, he explains this that's why he says ilm al-kalam is like medicine. Ilm al-kalam is not it's not necessary for every Muslim to understand. It's like a medicine. We must have some scholars who understand it, who know the principles, in order to clear the doubts. Whenever we have doubts and confusions between Muslims, we must have scholars. This is fardu kifaya, right? So this great theologian, who was a great mutakallim, he explained this in Ihya, and he wrote a particular treatise for that. And in the title of the book, he explains the purpose. He says, the title of the book is Iljamul Awam an Ilm al-Kalam. Subhanallah. Iljamul Awam, yani dragging the awam, the common masses, Muslims, from ilm al-kalam. It's not for them. It's for scholars. And the Salaf, the early Muslim scholars and Sahaba and Tabi'in, they were safe from these doubts. And it is in the times of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, that these discussions started. And Imam Ahmad also, he engaged in answering. He engaged in ilm al-kalam. Yani when you give your arguments, you discuss, you debate, you also become the part of that tradition, right? So we must understand the fact that it's not necessary, it's not beneficial for awamun nas, for common Muslims, but scholars should understand it. Even if there are foreign influences in this science, we must understand the fact that aql is important for us as Muslims. Aql is the greatest blessing of Allah. Quran has given some great aqli arguments. And in fact, those who criticized ilm al-kalam, as I said, Ibn Taymiyyah and those who followed his tradition, they were not against aql per se or rational arguments. They were against only using those rational arguments which according to them are dhanni. Okay, that's why we have this great Yemeni scholar, Imam al-Yamani, and he follows the Taymiyan tradition. He wrote a book, he called it Tarjihu Asalib al-Quran ala Asalib al-Yunan. The point is, we believe in rational arguments, we'll use it, but let's take these rational arguments and aql from the Quran itself. No need to take it from Greeks. So this is something different. Some scholars, contemporary scholars, they don't understand this fact. They don't go deep. They think that it's prohibited to use aql and aqli arguments in any way in explaining the religion. This is absurd. This is not right. Okay. What are the main differences between Shafi and Maliki schools? Yeah, this is a different topic. It needs a full session. Maliki and Shafi schools in fiqh or in aqidah. Maybe we'll discuss this, inshallah. How do we understand majority of hadith being dhanni? It's not a problem. It's not, there is probability of, there is ihtimal. If you remember, we said dhann, according to the Islamic terminology, does not mean doubt. It means ihtimal. There is ihtimal. And this ihtimal keeps the door of ijtihad open for the last day. And this is the ibtila. Allah has kept it like that. So it will become a source for schools of thought, different mujtahideen. They will benefit from each other. And this will nurture our religion. This will nurture our fields of knowledge. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. But yes, we said dhann can be lifted to the level of yaqeen if we have indications. So if we have a hadith and then we apply the hadith methodology in it, we try our best to understand the possibilities of doubt in it, and we apply the research methodology, and we reach the conclusion that this hadith has proven to be sound. So we can take it to the level of dhann rajih, or we can even take it to the level of yaqeen. Yani for example, mutawatir hadith, or a particular meaning which has appeared in so many ahadith, makes it mutawatir. So it is not mutawatir in chain, or it's not mutawatir in sanad, but it's mutawatir in meaning. So for example, the hadith of shafa'ah, intercession. The concept of intercession, the Prophet will intercede for the sinners of his ummah. This concept has appeared in so many ahadith, which are ahad individually, but it becomes mutawatir in meaning. And all these narrators, they will not agree on perpetuating a lie. So it's not a problem. If aql has no room for takhalluf, then how can it lead to dhanni sometimes? No, when we said aql, we were referring to the definitive aqli arguments. Definitive aqli arguments, no room for takhalluf. But there are certain aqli arguments based on aql which lead to only dhann. So we have to differentiate. If the first muqaddimah is problemized, like how Ibn Ashur did, how does it affect the conclusions of Shātibi? What Ibn Ashur says in Maqāsid al-Shari is wrong. Yani it's not right. He has exaggerated. So he says, no, this is wrong. Usul al-Fiqh cannot be qat'i. And some contemporary Usuliyun have refuted Ibn Ashur. I will not go into the details. And I'm not going into technical details. I'm trying to make this course a blend between academics and da'wah and stuff, because everyone here is not well versed in Islamic sciences. But yes, so for example, one of the contemporary Usuliyun, I respect him a lot. He is an ocean of knowledge from Morocco, Sheikh Mawlud al-Sariri. He teaches on a mountain in a madrasa. He's one of the best minds, wallah, if you read his books. You can follow him, his durus on social networking platforms. Sheikh Mawlud al-Sariri, in his ta'liqat on the nazm of Muwāfaqāt. Another Moroccan scholar has written a nazm. Yani he has arranged the themes of Muwāfaqāt into poetry. And the Sheikh Ibn Mawlud al-Sariri, he has ta'liqat. He has taught it and it has been published. In that, he mentioned this, and he refutes Imam At-Tahir ibn Ashur. He says, no, he has exaggerated by saying that we cannot reach qat' in any principles of usul al-fiqh. This is wrong. And he has misunderstood some concepts of Shātibi. He exaggerates. This is what he says. Wallahu ta'ala. The purpose of fiqh is to arrive at the hukum of Allah. If isolated is not definitive, then the chance of arriving at the hukum of Allah is slim. Is this a valid argument? No, basically, see, we are not talking about fiqh here. We're talking about usul. We must differentiate between fiqh and usul. Inshallah, in the third muqaddimah, or in the second muqaddimah, at the end, if you read from the translation, you will see Imam al-Shātibi, he warns against khalt. He warns against confusing between ulum. So we must separate between, we must understand the purpose of different ulum. Fiqh is something different. Of course, ijtihad is dhanni. Ijtihad is dhanni. But the hukum shari based on a valid ijtihad leads to dhan, and the dhan is valid in our religion. It's not a problem. But the hukum shari based on qat'i evidence is qat'i. Anything based on qata' is qat'i. Okay. So for example, Allah is one. Or for example, the obligation of salah, the prohibition of zina, these are qat'i ahkam based on qat'i evidences. So this is a wrong argument. The matter of usul being qat'i is only with regards to the evidences, but not the principles and methodology. No, it's both about principles and the evidences. But yes, the details of evidences, details, and the principles, the details of the principles here and there can be dhanni. Okay, but the base, and for example, Quran is the main evidence of ahkam. Sunnah is the evidence of ahkam. Ijma is the evidence of ahkam. But let's take the example of ijma. No one disagrees. Even Mu'tazila, and this is a wrong concept. If you read Mu'tazila deeply, many wrong things have been attributed to Mu'tazila because it's based on ilzam, yani counter arguments. Many of their sources were not published until recently. So even ijma as a concept is qat'i. But then we have types of ijma. Some ijma'at are dhanni, al-ijma'u sukuti, right? And there are sometimes in practice it leads to some serious consequences. For example, the famous mas'ala of tariku salah, the one who leaves prayer, a Muslim born in a Muslim family. He believes in Islam by his heart, but he does not pray. Or he prays sometimes. He prays only Jum'ah. What is his ruling? Fuqaha have disagreed about it. But those who say, from usuli perspective, not going into the hukum, please understand this. Those who say that he is out of Islam, he becomes a kafir, they use a famous ijma quoted by Imam al-Tirmidhi in his Sunan by a tabi'i. He says, the Sahaba did not consider leaving any action disbelief except prayer. So actions of Islam, leaving them, they only consider fisq, sin, except salah. Leaving salah is, so they say, see ijma. Now, ijma is qat'i, it leads to qata, it means we cannot disagree with it, right? But this ijma is not ijma sarih. Ijma sarih means when all mujtahideen, they in writing or verbally, they mention it. Yani, this tabi'i did not meet all Sahaba one by one and they mentioned it. They said this, or they in writing. No. This is sukuti. Some Sahaba said this and other Sahaba did not object to it. And this tabi'i concluded that Sahaba did not consider leaving any action kufr except prayer. So this ijma is dhanni, it's not qat'i. It's ijma sukuti, we call it sukut. If some mujtahideen, they claim something, other remain silent. Why is it dhanni? Because there is probability in sukut. There's probability in silence of others. They remain silent because they agree, but maybe they remain silent because they fear for their life. Maybe they remain silent because this mas'ala did not reach them, or there is probability of other reasons. So now see, if we don't understand these masail, it leads to serious consequences. There are details to that. We'll not go into that. Why is the term aqliya used and not yaqiniya? Because yaqeen is the fruit and aql is the source. We're talking about the sources. Brothers, please ask questions which are relevant to the topic and ask in 1 or 2 lines. And we cannot go into discussion. Inshallah, the courses will come, we'll sit together, we'll discuss a lot of things, but we cannot discuss everything in 1 session. Is it haram to reject a hadith that is definitive in meaning? Of course. It's haram to reject any hadith without any reason. Rejecting Sunnah as a source is misguidance without any doubt. But rejecting a particular hadith for a reason is valid, no problem. Scholars have rejected. Maybe it contradicts the Quran, it contradicts another hadith, you prioritize, it's not a problem. But rejecting hadith without any reason is a sin. It seems like variances are often based on semantics and terminologies. For example, some scholars say there are only 2 types of evidences, aqli and naqli. They do not include customs, and based on your explanation, they would include customs as a sub-classification of aqli. It doesn't matter. It's not a problem. لا مشاحة في الاصطلاح. There is no problem in using different istalahat if the meaning, if the conclusion is the same. The point we are making here is that some aqli arguments and evidences are qat'i, some adi, some arguments based on ada are qat'i, and some arguments based on naql are also qat'i. And this is the point here. Yes. Isn't ijma' al-sahaba accepted as qat'i, but not ijma' al-mujtahidin, ijma' al-ummah or other types? Yes, again, see, the concept of ijma' is qat'i in its essence, but the types of ijma'at is a dhanni matter. There are scholars who accept only ijma' of sahaba. There are scholars who, in explaining, if we go deeper, they say wuku is possible, possibility of ijma' till the laws, it's possible, but after sahaba, it has not happened. Some make the argument in the opposite way. They say wuku is not possible because now the ummah, the scholars of the ummah are scattered around the globe. We have difference of opinion, we have different groups. It's very difficult. And in ijma, which groups of the Muslim scholars do we include, which we exclude? It itself becomes a mas'ala. So there are scholars who discuss about this, but the concept of ijma in itself, okay, that's why if you go to refer to Imam al-Shafi'i, in discussing ijma, he first talks about ijma'at, which are basic to our deen. And also, we can say this concept of ijma, based on al-ma'lum fi ad-din bil-darura, the knowledge of our deen based on necessary knowledge, qat'i, can become a catalyst of unity, ittihad, ittifaq in the ummah. Right? So this is not a session about ijma. It needs a separate session, inshallah. If akhbar al-ahad are proved sahih and deal with the basic concept of deen, will denying it constitute kufr? No. No. Rejecting the authority of khabar ahad, rejecting the sunnah, is tantamount to kufr. It can lead to kufr. But rejecting a particular khabar ahad, so we can say we have 2 types. Rejecting khabar ahad due to a valid reason. Every scholar does that. It's okay. It's permissible. Sometimes it's necessary. But rejecting a khabar ahad without any reason is sinful. It's sinful. It's not kufr. We have this famous principle mentioned in the books of Aqidah and also in the basic books of Mustalah al-Hadith, that mutawatir gives the benefit of ilm, right? And khabar ahad gives the benefit of amal. Mutawatir gives the benefit of yaqeen, and khabar ahad gives the benefit of only dhann. There are some contemporary Salafi scholars who claim that this is basically a Mu'tazili classification. and we reject it. This is wrong. This classification is, for the first time, if we go to the sources, according to my little knowledge, it was propounded by Imam al-Shafi'i in Al-Risala. It clearly says that if a person rejects mutawatir, we will say to him, tub, make tawbah. But if a person rejects khabar ahad, we will not say tub, make tawbah. We will only say la yanbaghi. It does not befit you. It's not good. It's not right. It's not appropriate that you reject khabar ahad. These are words from Ar-Risala. And from this, the scholars of hadith, they took it from Imam al-Shafi'i and they turned it into a principle. Okay. Please, Sheikh, my question about psychology brings into question the whole issue of aql as definitive. See, again, depends on how do we define aql and how do we understand the aqli arguments. But from Muslim point of view, we say that all aqli arguments are not definitive. So we have definitive aqli arguments and we have dhanni aqli arguments. And what is the fine line between the two? And this is, it needs a separate session. It needs some research also. But let us agree on this basic concept that we have aqli arguments which are definitive and we have aqli arguments which are only dhanni, which give the benefit of dhann only. But here Imam al-Shātibi is talking about the definitive qat'i aqli principles. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabi al-ummi. We'll only take this will be the last question. Inshallah, have some patience, steadfastness, inshallah. We'll discuss everything. It's good that our students are engaging and the discussions we're doing, it's leading to thought process thinking, brainstorming. This is what we want. This is what we, inshallah, desire from these sessions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the best of knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our mistakes and shortcomings in these sessions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us sincere students of knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in applying this knowledge in our lives and guiding others according to this knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the capability of thinking, aql. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq, guide us to the best ways. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I read in a book that there is a dua which is from the du'as of Khadr alayhi salam. Wallahu alam about the sanad of this narration, but scholars mention this. This is from the du'as of Khadr alayhi salam. And it's about feeling, connecting with the ummah. The dua is, Allahumma arham ummata Muhammad, Allahumma ghfir li ummati Muhammad. Oh Allah, have mercy on the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Have forgive the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Connecting with the ummah, working for the upliftment of the ummah, revival of the ummah, according to our capabilities, giving our share in this great work is the best we can do in our times. It can be teaching Quran to children, but having this yearning in our heart, or connecting with the ummah, or it can be something big, doesn't matter. Innamal a'malu binniyat. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept us in his cause. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us khuddam, servants of his deen, accept us in the service of his deen, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us beneficial for ourselves, for our friends, for our families, and for the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma ansur man nasara dina Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam waj'alna minhum واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم Ameen, ameen, ameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. Inshallah, if we did not respond to any questions, inshallah, just note them. We will take those questions in the next session and we will discuss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See you inshallah in the next session bi idhnillah.